Um, okay, good to see you all. Here is our uh, Tibetan New Year class on illuminating the intent, illumination of the intention class. Excuse me. Hi, Jennifer. So we may be missing a few people. Apparently, Paul is out in Arizona helping his sister sell their mom's house. So he said he might get on, but probably not. John is helping his daughter, Esa, move from a roach-infested dorm. I mean, actual roach, not smoking roaches, uh, actual cockroaches, to a nice place. So he may not be here either. So we don't have our usual scholarly, other than Richard and Snehi and our usual scholars, Stephen and Nadine and so forth. So today's Tibetan New Year. We're going to begin with some prayers. Karen, would you like to put up the prayers? Although I think most people know them by now. Try to take refuge, Mahayana refuge, and generate bodhicitta. Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunen ki pe sognam ki drola penchir sangye drupa sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit wandering beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu badu tagni kyapsu chi kagi chunen gipe sognam ki rola penche sangye rupasho. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers. So this is reminiscent of the preliminary. Before making the mandala offering, one takes the base and cleans it with one's forearm, where supposedly the bodhicitta vein goes 3 times clockwise and 3 times counterclockwise. You can put perfume on the base and strewn it with flowers, first of all. Adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm. May all wanderers, all migrators enjoy a pure realm. And then the request to our Dharmakaya gurus, our primordial gurus, O holy and perfect pure lamas from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. In essence, is it kind of like a prayer to turn the wheel of Dharma to the teachers in general, but to the Dharmakaya aspect of the Buddhists, to bless the speaker's mind stream to speak precisely in accordance with those of the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, good to see you. Hi, Rocio. And Yudi Zai.
Hello.
Yudi, are you here for the first time? I don't remember you.
Oh yes, my first time. My friend Sasha recommended it.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So I hope you're not too intimidated by the material. So we're going to begin with a little meditation after saying the words of the prayers to try to meditate on the meaning of that, calm our minds. So sit comfortably, your spine's straight. If you're seated, you can sit in the cross-leg position or with your legs down. Eyes partially open, partially closed. and place your mindfulness on the respiration that is occurring at your nostrils. It said that when one is practiced in this satipatthana kind of meditation, you can calm the mind in 21 cycles or even 7. So assuming that you are advanced students, your mind is already a little bit calmed, place it now on the, place it, your mindfulness now, instead of on the breathing, on the mental consciousness itself, by recognizing its contents, what you're thinking about, your sense of I, observations about the present, memories of the past, plans of the future, emotions, images, all of them like clouds in an otherwise clear sky. Concentrating on the space between the thoughts, or even when you're skilled, even the very presence of the thought, images and so forth, inducing an understanding that for that thought to be present, the mind has to have this conventional clear light nature, non-obstructing nature that you can observe with your wisdom and gnosis eyes. If you can get to the point where simply recognizing that clear light nature, that developmental Buddha nature that allows us to become a Buddha, when that causes, when that induces a sense of joy in your mind, you've recognized this great resource for what it is. It's something that we can recognize because we have this life of leisure and endowment that Buddha called an auspicious moment, being human with sharp faculties, not having the total disturbing situations of birth in the hell realms or animal realm or praetor realm and so forth. Being born at a time when the Buddha has taught, those teachings still exist. There are community members, sangha that are practicing together, benefactors. that we can use this, recognizing that we can use this auspicious moment to fulfill our highest potential, to achieve liberation from cyclic existence, to put an end to our suffering, become totally content and happy, or more profoundly, we can enter the Mahayana path, attempt to enter the Mahayana path by taking cognizance of all mother sentient beings, called mother sentient beings because within numberless lifetimes, they have all been our mother, numberless times, each and every one of them, even our enemies, even those we despise, and they have been depthlessly kind to us. So thinking of their welfare, wishing to help them not just only with material needs and advice this lifetime, but to lead them out of suffering into everlasting happiness of enlightenment, we have to achieve that state, a state of omniscience. To do that, we have to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom. In order to do that, we need to know how to collect, how to accumulate those collections, which is explained in Chandrakirti's Majjhima and Lama Tsongkhapa's illumination of the intention that we're studying. So try to set a motivation. I'm going to listen, I'm going to participate in order to become a Buddha. I'm going to listen, contemplate, and meditate on the material in order to become enlightened, a fully enlightened Buddha, so that I can effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error lead every sentient being step by step out of wherever they are in cyclic existence into the state of enlightenment. I'm going to participate in the class in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Okay. Good to see you all. We say, Losar Tashi Delay, auspiciousness of this Tibetan New Year. We're on Tibet, or the first day of the new year. It's supposed to be very auspicious. And so we've tried to clean our mind. Just the Tibetans usually clean their house or their apartment before New Year's. I didn't. I'm a bit of a rebel, but I tried to clean my mind a little bit. Some news, just first of all, we mentioned before class, Mommy Mac's longtime friend of Kopan and the FPMT is in her, perhaps her last days. She is in her 90s. Shankar reminded me, I thought she was in her 80s. I'll be 79 this year, so I didn't realize she was that much older. I worked for Mommy Mac's in Kathmandu and in India when Lama recognized she needed some help, so he'd send me to help her. So I know her very well. She supported Kopan at the beginning. She supported Lama Yeshe and Lama Sopa Rinpoche financially, and also when they wanted to build Kopan Monastery, she provided a lot of the help to buy the land and organize things while she was teaching in Kathmandu. I think she was either a kindergarten teacher or in the administration at the American school there. But she would come up to Kopan, and as time went on and boys came to Kopan, the monks, first from the Sherpa regions and then from other Tibetan-speaking regions of Nepal, she helped to provide the food, the money for the food for them. She would even drive down in her Jeep to Kathmandu and bring up the food and so forth. And then she started businesses to financially support Kopan afterwards. So she's in her, she's not accepting, she doesn't want to eat or drink, apparently. Correct me if I misspeak here, Shanka, somewhere. Where's Shanka? Oh, there. So she's at her home, and members of the center are staying with her, a little bit reminiscent of William's last days. Is that more or less correct, Shanka? Do you want to add anything?
No, I think you got the gist of it. Yes.
Okay, so a great friend of the FPMT, great friend of Lama Yeshe and Lama Sopa, and also the Thupten Norbu Ling Center in New Mexico, where in the vicinity of which she's lived for some years now. So just wanted to mention that. Okay. So before we begin, anyone have any vexing questions? Any Dharma itches that they need scratched? Oh, okay, Mikhail. Okay, I should recognize that scratching of your eye was a really. Okay. What do you think?
Thank you. About the basis of an imputation, I was wondering when meditating on deity yoga, the deity is merely imputed, but what is the basis of imputation of that merely labeled deity?
The appearance. So you have to generate that appearance. Say if you were generating yourself as Tara or Haruka, Vajrayogini, Yamantaka, whatever deity, Chenrezi, you meditate on emptiness, first of all, so that there is no appearance to your mind. Your mind is not grasping at your ordinary sense of the self. And out of that emptiness, through the stages of the sadhana, the particular practice that you're doing. A sadhana is a druptap in Tibetan, the means of achievement. So that's sort of like a manual that tells you the stages to meditate in that tantric procedure. You arise perhaps in the sphere of emptiness, and having used logic to say that the ordinary way that I conceive of myself does not exist, and the ordinary appearance of my body to my eyes and appearance to the body also to your other senses. I mean, your sense consciousness senses your body, and your ear hears it sometimes, your nose smells it, your tongue tastes it, and so forth. The ordinary appearance is encrusted with this appearance of inherent existence and doesn't exist at all that way. And so I am going to instead appear as I will in the future in the resultant state of Buddhahood. I'm going to appear at myself as, let's say, Vajrayogini for the benefit of sentient beings. And so there are certain stages within that clear light. You might appear as a syllable, vam, or something like that. Eventually you have this appearance that you've generated, and you try to, although this is fabricated by your mind, this appearance, you use logic to say, this is more really who I am, because I will become this way in the future. And this appearance is, I've tried to generate out of the state of emptiness. And even on the generation stage, they're still grasping to that as inherent existence, that is much less than ordinary grasping to yourself in your ordinary form. Okay, so that appearance is the basis of imputation of of the form aggregate, and the basis of imputation of the mental aggregates is your consciousness coming out of that clear light, again with the divine pride of being the omniscient mind, and you're thinking, I am Vajrayogini, I am Yamantaka, I am Tara, I am Avalokiteshvara, whatever. So those are the bases of imputation of yourself then. Does that help?
Great. Yeah, thank you very much.
Of course, yeah. So, okay. So I would like to begin with the motivation that Geshe Sopa gave when he was teaching Gompa Rapsel. This is from oh, I didn't put down the date. This is, I think, in 2002. I didn't put down the date. I was putting down the date of another time he taught this verse. This is a verse, two verses from Lama Tsongkhapa's Praise to Dependent Origination, Praise to Dependent Arising, which Geshe quoted different verses of on many different occasions. In fact, in the 5 or 6 years he taught Gompa Rapsel during the summers in incredible detail, like we're trying to do. He quoted verses from the Praise to Dependent Origination several times. So it was an independent composition by Lama Tsongkhapa praising the Buddha's, presentation of dependent arising. So I will read to you, this starts with verse 5. So just for auspiciousness, I'm going to recite the Tibetan also. Gangyang Kenla Raklepa Dede Rangshin Gitongshe Sungwe Dile Yasenpe Legdom Suni Chishik Ye. So this is verse 5 in the translation that Thupten Jinpa made of the text. Originally, I think there might have been another verse that was counted as number 1. So sometimes this is counted as verse 6, but generally this is verse 5. So Jinpa translated, whatever depends on conditions, kenle rakleba, ken means conditions, that is devoid of intrinsic existence. Actually, the text says that is empty of nature, rangshin, svabhava. So Jinpa's kind of giving a interpretation of that. Whatever depends on conditions, that is devoid of intrinsic or inherent existence. What excellent instruction can there be that is more amazing than this proclamation? You might say, well, I don't know. Whatever depends on conditions, that is empty of any self-nature, any intrinsic existence, any inherent existence. What excellent instruction can there be more amazing than this? So what's the point of that? The point of that is that the lower schools believe that phenomena that depend on conditions are truly existent. The lower tenets and the Majjhimikas, the Svatantrikas, other than the Prasangika, say that they are inherently existent. That causes and conditions can't be used as a proof of emptiness. So this is Lama Tsongkhapa is praising the Buddha that way. So Geshe explained it this way. That means anything, any functioning thing that depends on causes and conditions. Therefore, whatever depends on causes and conditions is empty of their own nature, their own existence, empty of inherent existence. Sorry, did someone have? Okay. And then this line, what excellent instruction can there be more amazing than this proclamation? where is there any excellent explanation, good advice with clear instructions? Who else can say it in such a manner? It is, who other than the Buddha? What is there such an amazing kind of instruction? Where is there such an amazing kind of instruction as this? The Buddha is the one who taught that because everything depends on causes and conditions, they are therefore empty of inherent existence. This is, for many beings or many scholars, amazing, mind-blowing speech. If you say this to the Vaibhashikas, Transikas, Chittamatrans, or Svatantrikas, like that emoji, where the brain is blowing out. How can you say that? This is amazing. Amazing, probably from their point of view, in a derogatory sense, first of all. And then the next verse, verse number 6, gives the reason for that. So again, I'll just read the Tibetan. Kangdu Sungwe Chipa Nam. Chipa is a word we use for childish or immature or infantile. Gangdu Sungwe Chipa Nam Tarzin Chingwa Tenchepa Deni Kela Chopayi Dawa Malu Chope Go. So the English, according to Jimba's translation, by grasping at it, the childish ones strengthen their bondage to extreme views. For the wise, this very fact is the doorway to cut free from the net of elaborations. So Geshe-la explained, Chipa is a word we use for ordinary beings, which includes the non-Buddhists, the Tirthakas, and among the Buddhists, the Vaibhashikas, Sautrantikas, all the way up even to the Svatantrika Madhyamika system. All of these are Chipa from the Prasangika point of view. From the Buddha's point of view, they are infantile beings because they haven't realized emptiness correctly. Those who do not understand the ultimate truth of emptiness. For most of them, these phenomena that depend on causes, conditions, impermanent phenomena, they are real. They are truly existent because things are dependent on causes and conditions. Of course, for the Svatantrikas, they don't say they are truly existent. They say they are inherently existent. That's why he said for most of them. For most of them, they are real, truly existent because things are dependent on causes and conditions, which was the very reason Buddha taught them as being empty. So the very reason of dependent origination is used by the Buddha here to imply, to prove that phenomena are empty of inherent existence. The lower schools use that reason to say that they are inherently existent or truly existent. Because they are dependent, a virtuous cause brings peace and happiness. Non-virtuous causes bring bad, negative, miserable results. Every causality, every different result depends on their right cause, true cause. So there are many who think cause and effect are real, that they are true, and therefore dependent, because they are dependent on causes, conditions. Therefore, they can have various kinds of good and bad suffering and happiness, production and development, and all of these existing things are dependent. Structurally, cause and condition produces something actual, some real result. Most of them think this way, most of the lower tune or the childish beings. And we are also the same. We're still childish beings, beginning when empty of inherent existence, something which does not exist in its own way, that is a very unbelievable kind of nature to us. What is believable to us is real cause and effect and reality, good and bad, everything dependent on causes and conditions. We are therefore childlike. Here they are called childlike in the scriptures. So the ordinary beings, soso kewo, individuals who have not realized ultimate truth, are called chipa, are called the childish, or you could sometimes you can, how do you sort of poetically say the immature, or something like that. All of the chipas, all the immature ones, or the childish, are bound by grasping to extremes. When we talk about the view of the transitory collection, the view of the transitory collection is one of the 5 afflicted views, right? One of the other views is called grasping to extremes. All immature beings are bound by grasping to extremes. That means extreme holding, grasping things really to exist in their own way. If something does not exist their own way, then they completely become non-existent for them. If they don't exist in their own way, truly or inherently, they become like a rabbit horn, non-existent. What holds that is ignorance. It also creates the thought that things are desirable based on attachment and so forth. Also, undesirable things, hatred, and all these karma, misery, and suffering and delusions, all of these rise as a result of that grasping. Chingwa, which is in the Tibetan part of the sentence, means bondage. They are tied or bound in the world, bound within samsara with this kind of karma. That very same kind of reason, dependent origination, because causes and conditions depend on something else, that is the very reason for the realized beings, the Khapa, or as Jimpa translate, the wise. That very kind of reason, dependent origination, is the very reason for the masters, the wise ones, like bodhisattvas who realize ultimate truth directly, realize shunyata, who clearly understand as the Buddhist taught. For them, that same reason, which is what causes others to fall down, for the great master, the great scholar, the wise beings, for them, it brings liberation. Elaboration, chopa, which is in the verse also, which means mental wrong views, various kinds of mental thinking, it's like this, it's like that, and so forth. Things, this and this rise, this is good, this is bad, this is other, this is me. So many elaborations holding attachment and hatred. This kind of net, dawa, which is in the verse also, it said, for the wise's very fact is the doorway to cut free from the net of elaborations. So troa means elaboration, mental wrong view. So many elaborations holding attachment and hatred. This kind of net, like for example, when you go to fish, they put a web of strings to make a net, bound and tied. So therefore, this trope dawa means we ordinary beings have the nets of these elaborations. So therefore, starting with the egotistic view, the view of the transitory collection, and then from there arise attachment, hatred, jealousy, thinking that all these things are really out there, some real cause and conditions. If there is an attitude of animosity when you encounter an enemy, then actual real enemy, you think that is an actual real enemy. Ultimately, objectively, there is an enemy. If there's something attractive or something you think objectively, inherently attractive, then there are cause and conditions. We think this makes happiness, peace, etc. All of these things, thinking in that way. So one who has the realization of shunyata, the emptiness of inherent existence, to them, cutting all these kinds of nets, binding, tying us to samsara. This is in the Tibetan verse, chope go, the door of cutting those things. This is dependent origination. This same reason is to some lower schools binding, to some it is enable us to cut the nets. So Buddhist teaching is the most marvelous, amazing teaching. Lama Khapa greatly praised that way. And then Geshe-la finished by saying, again, we try to get to that kind of door of cutting the nets of elaboration that bind us in samsara. We try to figure out that one. First, we should understand clearly what they are, what these elaborations are, what the nets are that are keeping us in cyclic existence. What is exactly knowledge? Some special kind of understanding should be developed. But then understanding is not enough. That understanding has to put into the long way to use that as a weapon. We have to put that into use as a weapon, then to get rid of the mental delusions and developing our highest goal. I wanted to share that because that is motivation on that particular morning. Geshe-la would teach in the mornings and the afternoons. He'd give a motivational verse in the mornings, and this was just at the section that we're talking about now. So I thought maybe synchronicity, try to bridge the gap with that. So we are beginning with this verse, with these lines in Jimpa's text, page 188, and in Anne Klein's text 183. The verse is, the commentary's author too writes, yogis engage in the negation of selfhood. Jimpa puts in parentheses 6.120d. That's so he's referring to a verse in the Madhyamakavatara we will be addressing directly later. Yogis engage in the negation of selfhood, and Chandrakirti, the author, states how it is necessary to realize selflessness through eradicating the object of self-grasping. I read that last time, so that's where we're going to start today. Okay. So Anne translates that as, I didn't put it right down here. I think she says Chandrakirti himself, right? Furthermore, the commentator Chandrakirti, she puts in brackets, says that when his entrance, that is the Madhyamakavatara, chapter 6, 120d says, the yogi refutes self, as Jimpa translates, yogis engage in the negation of selfhood. The yogi refutes self. This means that selflessness must be realized in the manner of eradicating the object of the conception of self, which is inherent existence. Okay, Jimpa says, through eradicating the object of self-grasping. Here, Anne translates that, eradicating the object of the conception of the self. So how does this verse, the yogi refutes self, in that context, we will encounter it later when it comes up in the context of the text. is talking about the yogi realizes that the grasping to the self has been the problem, what has caused us to remain in cyclic existence since beginningless time. And so the yogi refutes the self. That's the point, which means that selflessness must be realized in the manner of eradicating the object of the conception of the self. So the conception of the self, the object of that is an inherently existing I, the appearance of an inherently existent I that the conception assents to, believes in, grasps to. Okay. Are we on the same page? Everyone okay? All right. Okay, good. So then Jimpa's text translation continues. Therefore, if one simply withdraws the mind from pursuing its object without eradicating the object of self-grasping, this cannot be taken as engaging with no self. Or as Anne says, therefore, although without eradicating the object of conception of self, you merely withdraw the mind here from going there to objects. Through this, it cannot be posited that you are engaged in selflessness. So what is that talking about? That's talking about some people who think that by that to meditate on emptiness or selflessness, you just withdraw the mind from any kind of conceptions, from any kind of appearances to the mind where your mind can conceptualize them, and you just draw it in. You just sit there and have that no thought kind of experience. From the Nagarjuna's point of view, from the point of view of Chandrakirti, from the point of view of Lama Tsongkhapa especially, that is definitely to be avoided. That cannot be posited as being engaged in selflessness or engaging in, as Jimpa says, engaging in no self. The reason, yes, go on.
Venerable, sorry. Is this the Hoshang premise, or not premise, but is that what he spoke about?
That's one of the opponents that's being refuted here, right? Hashan Mahayana, the Chinese monk that debated with Kamalashila, right, at Samye. The position was any thought, whether a cloud be black or white, it still obscures the sun. So the implication of that for Hashan was any kind of conceptuality, whether it be virtuous or non-virtuous, obscured you from seeing reality, the sun. So that's one of the people that's being referred to, but there are other people who have this wrong conception. So the reason that just simply withdrawing the mind cannot be taken as engaging in selflessness is, Jimpa's translation, when the mind engages an object, it does so in one of three modes. So we just addressed this before class with Mikhail had asked a question, or Stephen asked a question, I can't remember. When the mind engages an object, it does so in one of three modes, one of three ways. It apprehends that object as truly existent. That's the general way that people, engage with objects that are especially important to them. My computer, my car, my body, you grasp at it as being truly existent. A second one is apprehending it as non-truly existent. Who apprehends things as non-truly existent? Jennifer, you have an idea?
Would it just be like the nihilists?
All lower schools?
Who apprehends phenomena as not truly existent?
I would think that those apprehending it as truly existent would be the eternalists, and then those apprehending it maybe as non-truly existent could be the nihilists, thinking that, you know,
Okay,
there's no functioning of things from a conventionally valid perspective.
okay, so here, apprehending it as not truly existent is a good thing. It's not a nihilist, because phenomena are not truly existent. So the only people who apprehend phenomena as not truly existent are people who have had an insight into emptiness, or Arya beings especially. They apprehend phenomena as not truly existent. So it's not referring to eternalists or nihilists. The first, apprehending phenomena as truly existent, is the way that all of us engage objects now. Those who have an insight into emptiness, who've realized emptiness, can engage phenomena as not truly existent. Let's say even Arya Bodhisattvas, when they arise from the meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness directly, the phenomena appear to them as truly existent, but by the force of the memory of their realization of emptiness, I kind of think of them as chuckling to themselves. Oh man, look at this. It looks so real, but I know it's not truly existent. I know it's not inherently existent. Okay, so those are two of the three ways. The third way is apprehending objects without qualifying them in either of these two terms. I was told I can either say either or either. So anyway, apprehending the object without qualifying in either of these two terms. It is not invariably the case that because one does not apprehend something as lacking true existence, like the second case, that one apprehends it as truly existent. You might think that it's either you grasp at it, apprehend it as truly existent, or you grasp at it as non-inherently existent, non-truly existent. But there's a third case that we are familiar with. We've mentioned several times in this course and in our earlier courses, also in the course on, what was it called? Practice of Emptiness. The fifth Dalai Lama mentioned there are these three kinds of ways of engaging with objects. The third kind of way is the way where you apprehend something without any particular dynamic in your mind grasping it as truly existent. You just think of it as a conventionality, like the example I've given sometime of the blacksmith who's asked what horse he's forging these shoes for, these metal, horseshoes for. And he says, oh, that horse over there, without necessarily grasping it as non-inherently existent. Probably the blacksmith, unless he's an exceptional blacksmith, hasn't realized emptiness, or not necessarily grasping it as truly existent. So there's a great category of situations when our mind apprehends objects. They appear as inherently existent, but our mind is not delving into that. It's just accepting it as conventionally existent. Does this sound familiar from what we talked about before? Some people nodding. Okay. Don, does that make sense?
Yes, I think it does. I think maybe that comes back from the low-rig teachings.
Yeah, we talked about that also in low rig, right? Good memory. Okay. Snehi, what do you think?
Venerable George, I remember you've discussed this a few times, and I always, get stuck at the third one because, as you said, everything to us always appears as inherently existent. So even though I'm not thinking about it, aren't I just taking it as intrinsically existent?
No. So I'm not sure if it's Stephen or Mikhail was asking this also before. There's a difference between appearing as inherently existent and paying attention to that appearance and grasping to it. Things definitely always appear to us, as we're not Buddhists, always appear to us when we're not in meditative equipoise on emptiness. They always appear as inherently existent. And if the situation is dynamic, if it's something like something that belongs to you or that you feel is attractive or is unattractive, like harsh words or, an uncomfortable situation, in that dynamic, the mind pays attention to the appearance of inherent existence and grasps to it that way. Thinks this is really bad or this is really good, But there are situations that are not fueled by that dynamic of seeing something as attractive or unattractive and grasping to it as inherently existent. Let's see here. Yeah, so Anne translates the same thing. When the mind operates on an object, there are three modes of conception: conceiving the object of observation as truly established, conceiving that it is not truly established, not truly existent, conceiving it without qualifying it as either of these two. What do you think, David?
Thank you, Venerable George. It sounds like, though, that third category, so the first category is everybody. The second category is someone who has had at least some realization of emptiness. And the third category is back to everybody again. Because when I go shopping, so the apples over there, none of them are mine yet until I put them in the cart.
Right.
But the apples over there are much like, that horse over there or whatever.
It could be. Yeah, it could be. If someone says, where are the apples? You could say, those are the apples over there. But if you're looking at the apples, you think, oh, those look good. Those are red. Those look tasty. That's probably involved in the first one, grasping at them as truly existent. But if you're just pointing them out, just noticing them, that can be the third category. So we'll be getting more detail in the coming stanzas here. Okay, are we okay? Making sense? So there's these three that we've mentioned many times before. So then Lama Tsongkhapa says, likewise, just because one does not engage with either of these two forms of self, just because of that, it does not necessarily mean that one is engaging with either of the two forms of selflessness. There are countless instances where the perspective of the mind remains in a third option. Or as Anne puts in with some bracketed material. Hence, although the object is not conceived to be without true establishment, because if the object is, hence, although the object is not conceived to be without true establishment, to be non-truly existent, even though you don't perceive it as non-truly existent, in other words, it is not necessarily conceived to be truly existent or truly established. It's not like the mind has to be one of those two. Similarly, although when merely withdrawing the mind in meditation, you are not engaged in conceiving the two selves, you are not necessarily engaged in the two selflessnesses. What are the two selflessnesses? What are the two selves? Richard, Gina?
Selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena.
Yeah, good. So you've got a way there that you could unmute by simply moving your hand to the side. What did you use your mouse to? Okay.
Yeah, I have a trackball actually.
Trackball, okay. So some of you have difficulty unmuting yourself. You should take Richard's example. Okay. For there are limitless ways of abiding in a third category of awareness. Okay, so that was that point. How are we doing? Making sense? Okay. Doris. Oh, Doris says yes, making sense. Okay. So then, Jimbo's translation continues. When it comes to the two forms of self-grasping as well, as Richard said, grasping the self of persons, grasping the self of phenomena, we should identify them in our own mental continuum. Looking there, we need to establish on the basis of the very thing we are deluded about, how it does not exist in the manner we ourselves are apprehending. Or as Anne translates that, having identified the two conceptions of a self in your continuum. So this is what we have to do. We have to identify in our mind how we're grasping to our own self. That's like identifying the object of negation in a meditation on selflessness, right? Usually we're talking about the selflessness of our own self. You have to identify the object of negation. Having identified the two conceptions of self, so the object of negation is not the conception. The conception is the mind's reaction to that appearance. The object of negation is the appearance of an inherently existent self. That's the referent object. I would say the referent object is the conventionally existent I. It's appearing to be inherently existent. The conception that you have to identify also is the mind's reaction to that appearance, if it's actually grasping to that as inherently existent. In the case of the third of these three categories, if you were to be very skilled, you would notice in some situations that the phenomena is appearing to be inherently existent, but you're not grasping to it. It's sort of like you're just ignoring that appearance, okay? So you have to recognize that. Having identified the two conceptions of a self in your own continuum, you need to settle that the bases with respect to which you make the mistake of apprehending the two selves, where's the word? Bases. So that's talking about when you're talking about the basis of my iPad or something is of the basis of conceiving the iPad to be, grasping at the self of phenomena, and the other basis is the grasping at the self of the person. So that's where there's two bases. With respect to which you make the mistake of apprehending the two selves, do not exist as they are apprehended. You need to settle that they do not exist as they are apprehended. How the mind is believing them to exist. Otherwise, refutation and proof that are directed outward are like searching for a robber on the plain, P-A-I-N, not the P-O-A-N, the robber, some hijacking movie, not like that. Otherwise, refutation and proof that are directed outward are like searching for a robber on the plain after he has gone into the woods, and hence are not to the point. I would say Jimpa translates that a little bit differently. He says, otherwise, if our refutation of self-existence and the affirmation of emptiness are directed only outward, what does that mean, only outward? That means you don't investigate in your own continuum how your mind is believing these things. That's the most important thing. If you're just a scholar and you read about these things and can correctly recite and describe all of these reasonings that won't necessarily affect your mind. You have to look at how your mind is reacting to the appearance of inherent existence of your own self and the inherent existence of other phenomena other than the self, starting with your aggregates and trees and your possessions and so forth. Otherwise, if our refutation of self-existence and affirmation of emptiness are directed only outwardly, then our pursuit becomes like a person searching for the footprints of a thief in the meadow. Maybe that's a better word than plain, in the meadow, while the robber has in fact fled into the woods. So Jinpa's made a basic grammatical mistake here. The word J in the Tibetan, so I can't call on the scholars of Paul and John, who are off doing other tasks right now, to go on this. In the sentence, Anne translates it, otherwise refutation and proof that are directed outward are like searching for the robber after he has gone into the woods. That's the word J. It's like when we talk about Jainang, some of you have received subsequent permissions. J can mean afterwards. And in this sentence, I think Anne has translated it correctly, searching for the robber in the meadow after he has gone into the woods, whereas Jinpa takes the J, and another meaning of J is sometimes that which is left after you walk on something. So the J can mean footprint. But in the grammar of the sentence, it doesn't work as the word footprint. So Anne's translation is better. Otherwise, refutation of self-existence and the proof of emptiness, if they are directed outward, that's like searching for a robber in a meadow after he has gone into the woods, and hence are not to the point. Or Jinpa says such a pursuit will have no impact at all. Okay, making sense? Pretty clear, right? Karen?
Thanks, Venerable George. We're at the halfway point if you wanted to take a quick break.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think I might take you up on that. So let's take just a short break. You can continue to discuss if you'd like. Maybe if they stop the recording, you can feel less constrained, figuring that if you say something stupid, if it's recorded, you'll feel guilty. So I'll just say, just a short break. I'd agree with that. I would agree with that. So in the context, if you ask why here, it's saying true as opposed to inherently existent. As Mikhail had suggested, they are, for the Prasangika, synonymous. It's in various situations, the Buddha used various words that can evoke particular kinds of responses, but being theoretical synonyms, that is true existence and inherent existence. Remember, they're called theoretical or hypothetical synonyms because for two things to be synonyms, they have to exist, and true existence and inherent existence do not exist, right? So I think the discussion was good there. Generally, it's not it's not that there's two objects. There's one object and one subject. So the object is the appearance of true or inherent existence of the I, let's say, or phenomena. That's that's the appearance. The subject, that's the object, let's say. The subject of that object is the mind to which it's appearing. So that mind, if it's realized emptiness, that mind can think, oh, that doesn't exist that way at all. That's the second mode of existing. The first one is going along with that appearance. Oh, yeah, yeah, that's truly existent. That's inherently existent. The third one is kind of like being oblivious of that, not paying attention, not finding a reason to engage in grasping to that appearance of inherent existence, which is how we spend most of our lives, going to the car. You recognize you're walking. You're not necessarily grasping. That walking is appearing to your conception as being inherently existent, but you're not thinking, I am inherently walking. You're not getting attached or angry with the walking or any other delusion that's fueling your attention to that walking. So you don't grasp to it as being inherently existent. It's not like there's two different objects. It's just one object. Sean.
But so
Yeah.
Would you repeat what you just said, please? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So we're talking about these three modes.
Right.
Let's go back. So how did Jimpus translate it? When the mind engages an object, so that means it's object. And when I'm putting my hand up here, that means your mental consciousness engaging something conceptually, right? Because the eye consciousness, we're not talking about the eye or ear or nose consciousness. We're talking about the mental consciousness operating or engaging in an object of mental consciousness, of conception. So when the mind engages an object, it does so in one of three modes: apprehending that object as truly existent, or you could say as inherently existent. Because it appears to be inherently existent, you apprehend it, you grasp to it that way. Second, apprehending it as not truly existent. So that object is still appearing as inherently existent, but by someone who has realized emptiness, even though it's appearing that way, they don't apprehend it as truly existent. The example I gave with our dear friend William, who passed away recently, William is walking down the stairs dressed as Santa Claus. He's appearing as Santa Claus. Maybe it's a really good outfit, and it even looks really like Santa Claus, but you know that's William, and so you don't apprehend that as Santa Claus, right? The third one here is apprehending it without qualifying it in either of these two terms. Or as how does Anne say, conceiving it without qualifying it as either of these two. That is, without qualifying it as being, as it appears, truly existent. You're not qualifying it as being non-truly existent because you've previously realized emptiness, and you know this is like an illusion. There is a multiplicity of situations where the object appears to be inherently existent, truly existent, but your mind is not centered on that aspect of its appearance. Your mind is not grasping to that as inherently existent. So that may come as a surprise to some of you, but we've talked about it a long time in various courses, that these are recognized as these three ways of engaging an object. So it's sometimes you can get confused because sometimes you say, but don't they always appear to be truly existent? Yes, they always appear. From the object side, they always appear to be truly existent, inherently existent. But what's important is your response to that appearance. You respond by saying, yeah, that's right. I believe that. That's really Santa Claus. Or you can think, no, that's not Santa Claus. I don't believe that. That's the person who's realized emptiness. The third way is, let's say, who could we give as an example? Maybe an Aboriginal from Australia who's been invited to your Christmas party. And what do you say, William walking down the stairs. They just see a person walking down the stairs. They're not grasping at it as Santa Claus. They're not grasping at it as not Santa Claus. Maybe that could be an example of the third one. Okay. Sean, what do you think? Actually, this is quite simple, actually, but anyway, go on.
Well, that example makes more sense to me, but it's still the part that I wouldn't understand is that an ordinary person is not going to see any of these things as not truly established, because then they would be non-existent, would they not?
No, that would be dependent for them to think that if something is non-truly existent, that it is non-existent. Hey, Paul, good to see you. For that stance, that would be a person who's holding some kind of tenets. We're not talking about that kind of intellectually formed delusion. In fact, we're talking about actually how they react. There are three ways of reacting to an object by the mental consciousness. You can either grasp at it as it appears, which is inherently existent, truly existent. You can have an opposite. You can grasp to it as the opposite of how it appears, because of having been realized, having had an insight into emptiness. Or in the third case, you can have no particular grasping to that one way or the other. So this is I'm going to be talking a little bit more about this, but Paul, what do you think?
I was just wondering if that third one, continuing without qualifying it as either of the two, was in reference to conventional valid cognition, where you're establishing something as conventionally valid, but not performing ultimate analysis on it. Is that possible?
That could be an example of that. Yeah.
Okay.
That will be coming up also. Ida, what do you think?
Well, this third way of conceiving things, wouldn't that refer to inattentive awareness?
No, necessarily. You could be very attentive of the horse or the apples, or you're walking, or the trees, but the mind is not paying attention to that particular aspect. That doesn't mean the mind is inattentive. Say, for instance, inattentive perception or
So it's not paying attention to the characteristics of the object.
to that particular characteristic. It could be paying attention to other characteristics. The tree is straight, the tree is moving, the tree is brown with green leaves or something like that. So, okay, Diana, what do you think? You need a trackball. Okay, there we go.
I don't know if this is of use to others. I've been thinking about it in grammar terms. In English, we don't use this thing called the subjunctive very often. But I could say, if there were a cat in my apartment,
Yeah.
and in that case, I'm neither saying that it's possible or impossible. I'm not saying it's some kind of cat. I'm not saying it does or doesn't exist.
Right.
If I said, if there were an elephant in my apartment, I would implicitly be saying doesn't exist, something that doesn't appear to me. And some Romance languages are very strict about this. Unless something is a definite fact, you're going to use different verbs to indicate. I'm just pointing at this. I'm not endorsing it.
Okay. Okay, good. I don't know how to pronounce Yuki. UD.
Oh, hi. I believe Shanka has his hand raised before me.
Oh, Shanka's hand is so melding into his bookcase there. I thought those were volumes of his book. Thank you, Yudi. Shanka.
Clearly, my skin color
Selection was
whatever,
move it into your bookcase there.
I'm trying to be, woke, shall we say.
Good.
Okay. All right. So I'm just thinking of an example here, right? And my example is much more pedant, whatever that adjective. Yes, pedestrian. Thank you. So if I'm walking and a woman goes by and I just say, "Oh, a woman went by," so that's just.
You wouldn't even have to say it. You wouldn't even have to notice that woman.
I just notice it, right?
Yeah,
but on the other hand, if I say, "Oh, an attractive woman other than my wife went by,"
right?
Then that would be in my mind grasping at a particular. Right. So then that would no longer be just this third category. It would be the first category.
Yeah. So the sort of would sometimes turn on whether the appearance appears to you to be attractive or unattractive or neutral. So if it has a definite cast of one of those things, because of the karma of saying that, say, what is it? Young Dharma practitioners, young boys say, "Oh, did you see those dakinis?" In other words, those attractive girls. So that is an example of the first one, grasping it at inherent existence, because it has been fueled by the appearance, generating a feeling in your mind stream of pleasure, which you then conceptualize as attractiveness, and then you even increase into attachment. So it's that process. So if you don't have any particular feeling about it, the horse over there, where are the apples? They're over there, and so forth, or just noticing someone walking by you on the street without you thinking of them as attractive, unattractive, or neutral, that could be an example of that. UD.
Thank you. My question is the third option of the Santa Claus costume person walking down the stairs, but this person doesn't recognize it's a Santa Claus costume. So basically this person is not projecting the meaning upon Santa Claus because there's no meaning of Santa Claus in their system. Then does this mean this person has understand emptiness or not?
They haven't understood emptiness. No, not necessarily, not at all. No, I was just grasping at some example that in this example that I've used many times before of, William coming down the steps dressed as Santa Claus. The adults know that it's actually William. The kids think that it's actually Santa Claus. It appears to be Santa Claus. They grasp at it that way. But even though it appears to be Santa Claus, the adults know that it is actually William. So I'm just trying to think of a third kind of person who would just see that walking down the stairs without grasping at it one way or the other, without thinking that is Santa Claus, that is not Santa Claus. That may not be the best example. But anyway, it's not that complicated. Louise, what do you think? Are you there? She's having trouble unmuting.
Yeah, it's unmuting. Okay, Venerable George, it seems to me that most of us, Dharma students, all of us Dharma students are on the third mode of existing. and maybe even Arya Bodhisattvas, the lower level of, I guess, lower stages of the path. Who would exist on the second mode? Who would use the second mode? Would that be Buddhas only?
No, it would be anyone who has an insight into emptiness, and when apprehending something, let's say because they've had an insight into emptiness, it's kind of like the post-meditation session. They've realized emptiness, and now, although phenomena are appearing to be truly existent, they recognize that they do not exist the way that they appear. So that's a very rare individual. So it would be individuals, doesn't have to be Arya Bodhisattvas. It can be Bodhisattvas on the path of accumulation or preparation, even proto-Bodhisattvas before realizing bodhicitta, before entering the path of accumulation. If they have an insight into emptiness and they contemplate that when something appears to them as inherently existent, like their own self, they've done this meditation, they realize the self doesn't exist the way that it appears. To some degree, they don't have a direct realization, or they don't necessarily have a realization conjoined with shamatha and vipassana, union of shamatha and vipassana, which you'd get on the path of preparation. But still, they've realized emptiness to some degree, and they recognize something that they're thinking about appears to be inherently existent, but is not. So there would be many, many Dharma practitioners who would be like that. Most of us are probably generally in the first category a lot of the time with respect to our own things, my possessions or politics, or when you read the newspaper or you read about, climate change and people who deny it, or, people trying to kick out university professors, whatever kind of news you read, you're going to have some kind of dynamic. Sometimes you're going to agree with it, sometimes you're going to disagree with it. But in those cases, most of the time, we are engaging in the first. We're grasping it as inherently existent. Biden is an old man, or Trump is an idiot, or whatever. Whenever the different categories come up to different people, we will be grasping to them in that dynamic way in the first one. It's only in things that are sort of just peripheral that you're not that dynamically involved with. They don't appear to be attractive or unattractive, or benefiting you or not benefiting you, that third mode arises.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much, Venerable
Okay,
George.
so let's continue. So where did we get? So when we have thus identified well what constitutes grasping at true existence, means identified well within our own consciousness, we come to recognize numerous instances of thought that do not constitute either of the two forms of grasping at self-existence. Or as Anne says, when in that way you have identified well the conception of true existence, you will understand that there are many conceptions that are not the conceptions of self, that are not the two conceptions of self. The two conceptions means conception of a self of persons, conception of self of phenomena. There are many conceptions that are not the two conceptions of self. So this is talking about the third category, right? You could say indirectly it's talking about the second category, but the third one. Consequently, all wrong ideas of asserting that the reasoning analyzing suchness refutes all objects apprehended by conceptuality will be overcome. or as Jimpa translates, this will therefore help prevent all the misconceptions pertaining to the view that reasoning inquiring into suchness negates all objects apprehended by conceptual thoughts, no matter what. So this is a bit opaque, and just reading the words, you may not get what is meant here. Geshe Zopa, when he taught this section in 2002, said this: if you understand that, it's talking about these three kinds of ways of engaging with the object, right? Conceiving it as truly existent, conceiving it as not truly existent, and that which doesn't conceive it either way. If you understand that, then some of these mistaken wrong statements in the Tibetan text, there's lokpar topa, loktok, wrong views. Some of these mistaken statements, wrong thoughts, which say any kind of grasping by thought is denzin, is grasping the true existence. So that's kind of like the Dzogchen and some of the current practitioners. Any kind of any kind of grasping by thought is grasping to true existence, or wrong thought. Any kind of grasping at thought is a wrong thought. So that's like the whether the clouds are white or black, they still obscure the sun. This is kind of talking about the final stages of trying to realize emptiness, or the completion stage when you're striving to have no conceptualization. But from the very beginning, not having any conceptualization, thinking any conceptualization involves grasping to true existence. If you haven't realized emptiness, any grasp, it has to be the first category. If it's not the second, it has to be the first. That's a wrong view. The wrong view that every kind of thought should be refuted. The wrong idea is that whatever object of any kind of thought, that any kind of thought holds, are objects of rejection, of reasoning, analyzing emptiness, analyzing the ultimate. The logical reasons refute all of them. In other words, like in the how did Chimpus translate? This will therefore help prevent the misconceptions pertaining to the view that reasoning, inquiring into suchness, negates all objects apprehended by conceptual thoughts, no matter what. So that would some people think there's no kind of establishment of conventional truth. So Geshe continued, Khapa, there are various kinds of conceptual thoughts. There are the conceptual thought that grasps at permanence. There are conceptual thoughts that grasp at impermanence. That is a wisdom. And there are some other thoughts not related to that self. Impermanence or truth or suffering, one can have many such various kinds of thoughts, ideas, after sense consciousnesses. All of them are not necessarily refuted.
What do you want?
By the. Okay, yeah, what do you want? Not all of them are refuted by the reasoning analyzing the ultimate, because they're not reasoning analyzing the ultimate doesn't refute the conventional. Some of them should be developed. The thought of renunciation, the thought of bodhicitta, compassion and love, there are many such things that have to be pursued and developed rather than refuted or negated. So that's the sense of what this
Venerable, you're muted, Venerable. You muted yourself. Or
Yeah,
Yeah,
just around the beginning of the last sentence.
I don't know how that happened. Yeah, I hope no one muted me. Maybe I wasn't. Oh, maybe someone was muting because there was someone talking in the background in one of the conversations. So maybe someone muted the whole thing. Anyway, I'm here. You can hear me now, right? Okay. So this rather opaque sentence, which even Anne Klein even Anne Klein's translation doesn't clarify so much what's being got at. So Jimpa translated, this will therefore help to prevent all the, what is he saying? This, the idea that there's a third category that doesn't grasp things as either inherently existent or doesn't realize them as non-inherently existent. There's a third category. This will therefore help to prevent all misconceptions, all the misconceptions pertaining to a point of view that a reasoning consciousness that inquires or analyzes suchness negates all objects apprehended by conceptual thoughts, no matter what. Is that beginning to make a little more sense now? Or as Anne translated it, when in that way you have identified well the conception of true existence, you will understand that there are many conceptions that are not the two conceptions of self. Consequently, all wrong ideas of asserting that the reasoning, analyzing suchness refutes all objects apprehended by conceptuality will be overcome. So this is a thought that because reasoning analysis, when we talk about reasoning, that means that the vipassana that's analyzing emptiness, right? That's trying to get, it's not one with the aggregates, it's not different with the aggregates and so forth, that is trying to realize the selflessness of the person, or the reasoning that we're going to be talking about soon, that phenomena are not generated, are not born, are not produced from themselves, from something which is other than themselves, from both self and others, and they're not produced without cause. All of these reasonings, what they refute is inherent existence. They don't refute conventional existence. They don't refute, the existence of conventional phenomena that are affirmed, as Paul was saying earlier, by valid cognition. Shankar, what are you thinking? You need a different hand, or move your bookcase because it melds into the books.
Oh.
You look at its there. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, first of all, would Doris or you make that commentary by Geshe Zopa available? Geshe Sopa available?
Yes,
That would be useful.
I'll do that. Okay.
The second question I had was, so does that mean that, so for example, in traditions like Zen, where you're not doing this kind of strict analysis, right? And then the teacher says some koan, and then the world opens, whatever, everything. So does that mean that Tsong Khapa is saying that's not necessarily the way to go about it?
Well, it can be. It depends. Say, for instance, if you've analyzed, first of all, in the Zen tradition, there's a great tradition of relying on Nagarjuna's works. Who was it? Paul, remind me. Who translated the Lotus Sutra? Was it the Japanese scholar Suzuki?
D.T. Suzuki
Suzuki. So he actually wrote some commentaries on Madhyamaka, And they do delve into those reasonings. But let's say in the Zen koan tradition, there's still something, analyzing in various ways, borders on some kind of analysis that we're talking about, and that sometimes just a jolt, like a koan, someone's stating something like, show me your face before you were born, or what is the sound of I was going to say two hands, one hand clapping, or something like that. That can jolt you into some realization. I don't think you can, disparage any of that as being possible realization of emptiness. But some scholars, like the Hiroshi Sonome, who taught us Tibetan at Manjushri Institute, the Sonam Gyatso, the scholar, the Sakya Ngortartse Tulku, who was one of several brothers that all were Tulkus. They were all Tulkus in different traditions. One was Ngortartse Tulku was a Sakya. His brother out in California is the one that Doris and I were trying to get the Haruka Body Mandala teaching from. I think he's Kargyu. Another one is Gelugpa that lived in Bern. Anyway, he said, when asked what the Zen experience was, he said he thought that was just kind of like samadhi, what people called satori. Satori is one word the Japanese use for instantaneous realization, like maybe at the end of a koan or something like that, right? So it's unclear whether Lama Tsongkhapa would be disparaging that. Just in passing, I'll tell a story that you may have heard before. When I was in New York, I think one of the times when Diana and Brock had invited me to be teaching there, I was walking down a street in New York by some policemen I was dressed in my robes, and one policeman who's sort of, I guess he was kind of trying to make a point with his other policeman, said, "Hey, wait, look at this. Hey, come here. He called me over and said, hey, what do you do if you meet the Buddha in the street?" And of course, he's thinking of some Zen koan, as if you meet the Buddha on the road, you should slay him. And so he's expecting me to say that, and I said, "Oh, if I met the Buddha on the street, I would bow down and request teachings." And he said, "No, that's not right." So there are many kinds of misconceptions about what the role of koans are. I don't want to belabor it too much. David, what do you think? There you go.
Thank you, Venerable George. It sounds like that one line, consequently all wrong ideas of asserting that the reasoning analyzing such as refutes all objects apprehended by conceptuality will be overcome, is kind of like a safety net to keep you from slipping into nihilism, a nihilistic view. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, there are many other reasons also, but this is just to state that there are these three categories, that there's one category in which you do not engage in either of those first two. You don't grasp that the phenomena is truly existent. You don't realize that they are non-truly existent. It's just that kind of like, what would you call neutral, or trying to think of some political term today, So knowing that can help you to understand, to prevent the misconceptions, wrong idea, that any kind of analysis, that when you analyze emptiness, I'll try to find the right word with, I'm having my Biden moment. When you try to analyze phenomena with with a combination of shamatha and vipassana. You're analyzing it, and you come to the conclusion at the end that no phenomena truly exists, and you center on emptiness. That experience itself, that reasoning consciousness, does not negate the fact that ordinary conceptual thoughts dealing with the conventional level of reality, that they are refuted. It's not as though there is no good and bad, that there's not good karma and bad karma, that there's no need to engage in morality, that there is no permanence and impermanence. There's only emptiness. There's also the conventional level. Jennifer, what do you think?
Thank you, Venerable George. I was just going back to Lama Yeshe's book on Mahamudra. And so he writes, the Panchen Lama Losang Choki Gyatsen says there are two approaches to realizing emptiness. Between the two, of one, seeking meditation on calm abiding on the basis of the view, which I think is the one we're doing here, and then two, seeking the view on the basis of meditation. So I'm just curious, for the second approach, seeking the view on the basis of meditation, would the meditation be non-conceptual, and then would the view be conceptual or non-conceptual?
Well, this is talking about one approach of Mahamudra. So, for instance, in some of the traditions, just to be spending a lot of time on the kind of meditation that we do in the beginning of our class, meditating on the clear light nature of the mind, but particularly focusing not necessarily on that clear light nature of the mind as being a non-affirming negation, the lack of obstructing contact, to the lack of obstruction to the entry and reabsorption of thoughts into the mind. Instead of that, focusing instead on the non-conceptuality. So just having a non-conceptual mind. Unlike here, where it's saying, some of the traditions talk about that is the end goal, just having no thoughts, because all thoughts can be shown to be, what does he say here, negated by the analyzing by analyzing emptiness, by the wisdom analyzing emptiness. Not going that route, but just having that non-conceptual mind, and then within that, applying, once you've gotten to that point, which is sort of a fertile bed, a fertile stage, a clean laboratory to perform the analysis, then within that quiet mind, which has the aspect of empty, you analyze emptiness, and then you come to the view that way. The other way is first developing the view through analysis, and then developing that non-conceptual mind. So there are two different pathways for that. So let's just continue a little bit more. I'll try to post that at Shanka's suggestion, Geshe Zopa's comments. So the last part, finally, of this section says, there are many issues arising from questions such as this that require more discussion. Some of these have already been addressed on numerous occasions elsewhere, and some will be addressed below as well. So I will not elaborate. So this is Lama Tsong Khapa's words, right? So, and Klein, so Jinpa's note 354, because that particular statement you see in your text at the end, there's a little number 354. So that's referring to this note. He says, Tsong Khapa is here referring particularly to what he sees as the problem of over-negation, which he treats at length in his great treatise on the stages of the path. That means Lanrim Chemo. See Tsong Khapa, great treatise, and he says three 1.125-195. Actually, it means volume 3 in the Joshua Cutler Committee. You know, maybe you've seen this book, maybe some of you have. So this is volume 3. So on pages 125 to 194, actually, he says 195, or maybe he said 196. This is talking about the problem of over-negation. And there's another section just after that where he's talking about under-negation. So what is this talking about? That means if you, in trying to understand emptiness or true existence, to negate true existence, here he's saying over-negation. If you negate too much, that would be kind of the situation we're talking about now, negating not only true existence, but even conventional existence. Under-negation, of course, is a very big topic also. That would mean, like the Svatantrikas, in negating true existence, they still leave something there. They under-negate. They still leave inherent existence there. These pages misidentifying the objects of negation, etc., mainly refuting an overly broad object of negation. Pages 195 to 202 cover the under-negation, not negating enough. So with regard to that, I've had Doris kindly post up on the Facebook page. Has Doris disappeared? She's still there. Yeah. Documents 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So 1 is Geshe Zopa's review of Alex Wayman's book, Calming the Mind and Discerning the Real. The second, well, that was with the help of Paul. I was able to find the second and third ones, but I didn't realize in the same issue of the journal, there was also, all 3 of these reviews are there. First, there's Geshe Zopa's review of Alex Wayman's book. Then there's Alex Wayman's, what could you say, Paul? Acerbic reply to Geshe Zopa's review, you know, like criticizing Geshe Zopa all up and down the place, which is worth reading. There are other reviews I could post later of Jeffrey Hopkins countering Alex Wayman's review of Jeffrey Hopkins wrote Tantra in Tibet, right? He wrote this book based on the Nagrim Chemo and the Dalai Lama's lectures. Very great accomplishment. And Alex Wayman reviewed that in that same acerbic fashion. And Jeffrey Hopkins had to defend that also. If anyone's interested, I can post that. But all of the conclusions, Geshe Zopa wrote his review finding many faults in Alex Wayman's presentation of just this over-negation and under-negation. Alex Wayman writes a response to that, saying that Geshe Zopa doesn't know what he's talking about. He may never have read the Lanrim Chemo, Alex Wayman said in his review, and may not have even understood the terms. Geshe Zopa, of all the things that he's known for, Bodhisattva Charyavatara, Lanrim Chemo, Gompa Rapsal especially, and Lekshe Ningpo, great scholar, as though he wouldn't have read it. And then there's Geshe Zopa's response at the end. And I want to just read one paragraph here that might give you some encouragement. First, I regret Professor Wayman suspects my intentions and regards any criticism of mine of his own articles and translation as a wish to seize an opportunity to denigrate Western Buddhist scholarship in general. That's what kind of Alex Wayman is saying in his response to Geshe Zopa's review of his book. You know, we Western scholars don't have to depend on Tibetan scholars, you know. I did not, Geshe Zopa says, I did not say, as he quotes me, or even I hope seem to say, that Western scholars have produced no reliable translation of the Madhyamika classics. My statement that Western Buddhist scholarship so far has produced few such translations is, I believe, fair and made with reference to the general problematic of translating certain kinds of Buddhist texts in the absence of well-established norms that have the consensus of a majority of Buddhist scholars themselves. Okay, that's just prelude. So here's what I'd like for you to hear. This is in the third of those 5 articles, Geshe Zopa's response to Alex Wayman. To an argument aimed not merely at me, but at all Gelugpa monks and scholars, I would like to respond. For Professor Wayman to say that, quote, the Gelugpa monks spend so much time reading the later Yikcha, that means the monastic textbooks. You know, at Sarah, we have our own textbooks. At Ganden and Drebung, they have their own textbooks. Even Tashi Lungpo, others have their own textbooks. They're called Yikcha. They spend so much time reading the Yikchas that they rarely read even the words of their founder, Tsong Khapa, unquote. So that's quoting Alex Wayman. Geshe Zopa says, that's like saying American college students take required courses and do required reading and little beyond that. Making an analogy. In both the Tibetan and American educational systems, there always have been those who have gone beyond the requirements. And it is they, in general, who become the scholars and teachers. So I'm thinking, you guys, we're not just, just reading Lan Rim and just doing a little meditation. You're going to the nitty gritty, the dry bones, right? It is they in general who become the scholars and teachers. I think many of you already do teach and will teach in the future. So Khapa himself enjoined the study of Buddhist classics, the Shung Chemo, as offering the best advice, Mengak, for practicing Buddhism. So Lama Tsongkhapa said, don't just read my text, you should go back to the great texts themselves. That means the sutras and the shastras, the Kangyur and the Tengyur. They are the best source for advice, for practicing Buddhism. And many Gelugpa monks and scholars have taken and continue to take him quite seriously here. So I posted those up so those of you of inquiring minds and sufficient time can take a look. So after the first 3, there's number 1 is Geshe Zopa's review of Alex Wayman. 2 is Alex Wayman's over-the-top criticism of Geshe Zopa, never addressing the main faults that Geshe Zopa saw in his text. And the 3rd is Geshe Zopa's response to that. And then after that is the pages in Geshe Zopa's review in which of Alex Wayman that he, let me get back here, that he refers to. So in the notes in Geshe Zopa's review, he gives the page numbers of Alex Wayman's book where he finds fault. So all of those pages are in that document, the 4th document. So you could read what Geshe Zopa is referring to. And then the 5th one is Geshe Zopa's, is an excerpt from Geshe Zopa's text, the wisdom, his translation of the wisdom chapter of Lan Rim Chemo that was translated by, at the time, the nun, what's her name? Oh, it escaped me.
Dechen.
Dechen
Dechen
was Venerable Dechen. Now she's a layperson. Geshe taught the Lan Rim Chemo like he taught the Gompa Rapsel over many summers. And in that last summer that he taught the wisdom chapter, that was translated and annotated by Dechen Richard. So that last section, that last document 5 is a section from Geshe Zopa's book, and I'm just going to read a little of that to you here. The parameters of the criterion we use to negate things ultimately or inherently existent are very precise. We must recognize how something would exist at the subtlest level if it were to exist inherently. If we do not understand the subtlest general idea of inherent existence, then some aspects of inherent existence will not be eliminated. That would be like under negating. If we do not go far enough to correctly identify the subtle object of negation, we will still hold things as truly existent to some degree. For example, even when we understand the level of negation reached by the Vaibhashikas, we are still holding things to be inherently existent. Even the subtlemost view of the Vaibhashikas. Grasping at this false way of existing is to fall to the extreme of eternalism. If we do not negate the subtlest notion of inherent existence, we will not be able to free ourselves from samsara. So there are about 4 pages I excised from that text. So if you have that volume, which is the last volume of Geshe-la's commentary on the Lanrim Chemo, you can follow. But this will give you an idea of what's being talked about here when Jimpa says, some of these have already been addressed on numerous occasions elsewhere, and some will be addressed later in this text below as well. So I'm not going to go into more detail here because he already explained in Lanrim Chemo the problem of over-negation and under-negation and other kinds of problems. So, and Jimpa's note said that Tsong here is referring particularly to what he sees as the problem of over-negation. There's also under-negation, but it's principally over-negation, which he treats at length in the Lanrim Chemo on those pages. So if you have that volume, you can check those pages, and you can take a look at Geshe Zopa's document number 5 there, just to give you some background. So this is incredible supplementary material, and also reading some of these, like review of Alex Wayman's book and Alex's reply and Geshe Zopa's reply can give you maybe a feeling that you've got a lot of knowledge now that you didn't have a couple of years ago. You may not have, having read these things a couple of years ago before studying these subjects, you may not have made much out of what was going on. Okay, so I wanted to share that with you. So how are we doing? Suvansh, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Venerable George. Thank you.
Are you any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
No. Katie, you okay?
Yes, good. Lots of things to contemplate, especially when I'm engaging objects or not engaging objects, and just trying to see that in my daily life, like these 3 ways of apprehending.
Yeah.
Try to apply it, or be aware of it, I should say, be aware of how I'm thinking and viewing. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Good. Jennifer, you just came back on camera. Does that mean you have a question? No, okay. Paul, are you okay? Okay. Mikhail? Nadine? I could ask all of you, but some of you are hesitant to ever volunteer anything. Richard, do you have any points? No?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Stephen? Shankar? No? Okay. Amy?
Yes, I had a thought, but I maybe for the discussion.
Okay, come to the discussion. So Amy, you had a thought. Is it one of the 3 Is it grasp? Is that thought?
Yeah, it's about the three. It's about the three. Aren't they, as they exist, as the three exist, aren't they, don't they argue against the Svatantrika view of holding, of seeing things inherently through the senses?
Let's discuss that on Monday. Not quite sure. Good question. So, thank you again. So just to remind you, today is Tibetan New Year, Losar, a karmic multiplying day also. So you've created some virtuous karma today that is multiplied. So before we dedicate, just to say that next time we're going to be starting the section refuting arising from self and others, or another way of saying refuting refuting production from self and others, how the meaning of the scripture is established by reasoning. So what that means is we've talked a lot about scriptural citations from the sutras and the shastras that establish how phenomena are empty of inherent existence, that they are that way, that that's the truth. And now how to prove that by reasoning. So this is getting down to the nitty-gritty. So Richard has reevaluated and does have a thought.
Yeah, actually, I meant to ask this and forgot. We've now finished Anne Klein's book, which was really, really helpful as an alternate translation. Is there anything to help give us an alternate perspective on the upcoming chapters?
Yes. So Venerable Joe Nicel, who was with me at Instituto Lama Tsongkhapa when we studied Madhyamakavatara, and she remained there when I went off. She was there when Geshe-la taught Madhyamakavatara the second time, Geshe Jampa Gyatso. And so she translated the whole Gompa Rapsel, but she realized the first section she translated, I guess, Jeffrey Hopkins' translation that we use, Compassion in Tibetan Buddhism, she amalgamated that as the first part of the translation of Gompa Rapsel. But then when Anne Klein's translation came out, she amalgamated that as the second part, and then the rest of the Gompa Rapsel is her own composition. So that FPMT document is available, and Doris, can you remind us, is that up on Facebook page or on the Shantideva site, or maybe Snehi knows? Snehi?
Yeah, it's on the Shantideva site. I'll just post the link in the chat. It's in the protected material section because FPMT requested us to put it there. So the password, I'll put it here. Right.
The reason it's in the protected section is that they don't want it to be disseminated to people outside of the FPMT courses. I don't know why, but anyway, that's. And I think is it right, Doris? It's also up on the Facebook page?
That's been an ongoing question, whether it's allowed to go on the Facebook page.
Oh, okay, right. Because of the fact that they requested it only be for the course. So if you go to the Shantideva site, who is asking about that? Oh yeah, Richard. Yeah, so if you go to the Shantideva site, you can find that. So you can scroll through the sections that were taken directly out of Jeffrey Hopkins' Compassion in Tibetan Buddhism, the first 5 perfections, and then Anne Klein's book, almost verbatim. I think they changed a few words to go along with FPMT standards. And then after that is Joan's translation. So coming up, we will be having, instead of alternating between Jimpa and Anne Klein's book, we'll be alternating between Jimpa and the FPMT translation that was done by Venerable Joan Nysel, who is an old friend of mine and really incredible practitioner and scholar. She's the one that used to do the transcriptions live while Lama Zopa Rinpoche was teaching when people couldn't understand what Rinpoche was saying. And Joan, having heard so many teachings from Rinpoche, did. So the transcriptions she did were there was a big screen above there where the transcriptions, so kind of like watching the subtitles in a French movie or something like that, reading the English, the captions to understand what the people are saying. Okay, so that will be available, is available free of charge. Okay. So any questions? Any final questions? Mommy Max is try in your thoughts today to think of Mommy Max, who is in her last days at Tibetan of Thupten Norbu Ling, one of the founders of Kopan Monastery, a financial supporter for so many years. She's in her 90s. Shanka reminded me, I thought she was a little bit younger than that. She's refusing food and maybe just drinking a little bit. And
I just got an update then. Sorry, Venerable, for interrupting. She is not eating, not drinking, and not taking her medications, and she is barely conscious. And they've got Rinpoche's reciting mantras, the MP3, whatever,
right.
Going next to her ears because she can still hear.
Okay. So keep her in your minds. Let's try to dedicate these merits that we've created that were multiplied because of the auspiciousness of Tibetan New Year. If Karen will put up the dedication prayers. Due to these virtues, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha. You could say, may I quickly become, when you say Drup Girne, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all wandering beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Although this is generally a prayer, one can think of it as a dedication, to dedicating the merits that, whatever merits that we've accumulated, may the bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow in our mind stream and in the mind stream of others, and may that which has arisen in our mind stream, some semblance of bodhicitta, not lose that, but may it increase more and more. And then the long life, the prayer for the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with your lineage, all objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please now bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, as Rinpoche is known to do, him giving lungs and teachings, and through his practice, so many practices, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. You are the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while you strove exclusively for both the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for the welfare of mother living beings. You suddenly departed to peace. At this, I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, the children of the conquerors, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And then for all our spiritual friends, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, the supreme gateway for we fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy. What do we say? Sewe. Usually, here it says in Tibetan, it says Sewe kyope tapke sepai. Sewa, like Mikme Sewe, is also not just love, is a word that means both love and compassion. So sometimes we translate as mercy. Engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy. All illuminating spiritual friends, please live long and stable lives. And then try to seal that dedication, those dedications, conventional dedications, in the emptiness of the three spheres, meditating that the merits and the virtues dedicated are not inherently existent. The person who's dedicating them, I, myself, is not inherently existent. The goals dedicated to are not inherently existent. They conventionally exist, they appear, but when sought, they can't be found anywhere the way that they appear. They are empty. And the active dedication joining these virtues with those goals, just a process, can't be found anywhere on any element. Thank you very much. So have a glorious rest of Losar. Do some prostrations and offerings, whatever you can. Hope to see you on Monday for our discussion group. Looks like there will be some interesting topics to discuss. So take care.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable.